apologize. You can leave the meeting, I guess, if you don't want to be part of the recording. But at any rate, I'm gonna record this, and then I'm gonna be able to post it for anyone that can't be in the meeting so they can watch the replay. So as I put out in the meeting invite and the email I sent, the agenda tonight, I just want to touch on what's coming ahead for us in the rest of the season and the postseason. We'll just briefly touch on our postseason MAC Classic and regional selections process. And then there's 2 training modules. So today's training, the first one you can sort of see is queued up already about defining what a match is and correction of errors. The second training is on stalling. So these are trainings that are intended to help prepare us for postseason, because we get into these high stakes matches and we don't want to be on the wrong side of an outcome where there's an injustice done to some kid who eliminates him from state or keeps him from winning a championship or something. Okay, so that's what's on deck for here. I'll start by I'll just mention quickly that for our regional and MAC Classic assignments, I don't have the numbers yet of what we'll get. We'll just assume we get the same kind of number as we had last year, which was 12 assignments to regionals, along with 5 assignments to MAC Classic. The board will publish a ballot and survey mechanism so that people can vote, and you'll be able to vote for who it is that you want to represent PNWA at regionals and then also at MAC Classic. So the way it'll be structured, right, is that you'll be able to select, let's just assume 5 is the number that go to MAC Classic. You'll be able to select 5 candidates for who's going to go to MAC Classic. And then by selecting someone for MAC Classic, that automatically means you are voting for them for a regional slot. So then there will be a slate of people that you can say are the people you want to go to regionals. So beyond the 5 you select for state, then there's 7 others that you would, let's say, pick for regionals. And the board will tabulate all that and then be able to announce going into our final meeting of the regular season at the end of the month what the results are, who's going to represent us at regionals and who's going to represent us at MAC Classic. A couple of notes about what the board's role in all this is. We are by far, I've not heard of any other association that is as democratic as we are about this process. So the role of the board, though, is just to make sure that the candidates that are allowed to be on the ballot to be potential selectees for these positions, the board will scrutinize that to make sure that, for instance, somebody that's maybe certified but hasn't really worked, or this is their first season and they've only worked like middle school or something, we wouldn't put that person on the ballot for MAC Classic. Okay. Probably wouldn't put them on the ballot for regionals either. But the thing is, the board's function will be to do one level of scrutiny on that. It's up to the association to pick. Okay. So, and we don't prescribe any criteria to all of you around what you do to who you get to vote for, why you're voting for them. If you want to, I mean, a lot of people vote for me because I'm the best looking guy. I've heard that. If that's what they like to do, we don't preclude that. But whatever your reasons are, you're going to pick. And it's your association, and they are our representatives. So whoever we would select to represent PNWA, that's because the membership has expressed their confidence in those people. Okay. So that's the process. We'll release the ballot hopefully by the weekend coming up, and we'll give you the week to get your selections registered so that we'll be able to then give you the readout as we get together in our final meeting in 2 weeks to tell you who's going to represent us at each of those levels of postseason. Any questions about that process? It's the same process we basically used the last 2 years.
And there's certain people that are ineligible because they've been there 2 times in a row, right?
Correct.
We're staying with that. Okay.
Yeah. So like, for instance, I'm not eligible. Kale's not eligible. Andrew's not eligible, Andrew Turner. So there's a set of us that by our WIAA standard need to sit out. You can go for 2 years in a row, then you need to sit out. So we will be sitting out. So we won't be on the ballot for MAT Classic, but we would be on the ballot for regionals. And then when it comes to district weekend, just touching on like what's coming up for us, I've got all the assignments made for the rest of the season leading into the postseason. I don't have the postseason assignments yet. The board and I will meet when we put together the ballot for the regional and MAT Classic, and we will determine how we want to distribute people across to the different tournaments that we have to support. So we'll build out the crews for that, and then that'll get released through Arbiter as we come up for our last meeting of the season. So just be aware that on districts weekend, as always, we need everybody that has a pulse. Like if you have a pulse and you can breathe and you can raise at least one arm, if you can only raise one arm, we'll only assign you to matches where that person, that color is winning. Okay. So, but we need everybody.
So what weekend is that? It's
February 2nd and 3rd, I believe, is the dates, right?
Two starts.
So, yeah. So the first weekend of February, Friday and Saturday, that's district/league weekend. Then the next weekend, regionals. The next weekend after that, MAT Classic. So the heaviest load will be, of course, on the Saturday, which is, I think, February 3rd, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly. So that's where I'm just asking you to be available. If there's, I understand if you get sent out of town on business, or it's your, I don't know, it's your anniversary with your wife and you already are going to Hawaii or something. Like I can't get in the way of stuff like that. But if there's no other reasons that are like, totally exclusionary, that just asking you be available, like, because we need you. We can't borrow from other associations. They will be asking us to borrow people. Like everybody will be asking to borrow because basically nobody has enough the way they're currently constituted to cover everything they're going to have to cover. Okay. So thanks to everybody that sort of did yeoman's duty this past Saturday. Every one of us that was on a mat, like it was a full day, but we did all those tournaments and it worked out fine. And our customers, the coaches and teams, they were very satisfied with what happened. Like they were very happy with how we were able to make it all come off, even though we didn't have the opportunity to give them as many mats and as officials as they had requested. So I think the latest that one had finished was Issaquah, finished at 8:15. But 7 o'clock at Maywood Middle School for the middle school league championship. 7:30 over at Cleveland High School. 7:45 over at Bellevue, and then 8:15 at Issaquah. So it was a full day. I'm glad everybody had a day to rest yesterday. So that's what's coming up for us in regards to all of our assignment stuff. There's a few holes I need to fill remaining in the last week of the season here, the regular season. So if you're blocked for any reason in that final week, if you again can unblock yourself because you aren't going to be out of town or something that you thought you were going to be doing isn't going to happen, please do that. I need everybody's availability on those final days because I do have a couple of holes in the schedule still. All right. So that's sort of, somebody's got a question, go for it.
Yeah. Hey, so I've been coaching, this is Casey. I've been coaching Redmond High School, and I was talking to the coaches today, and they were wondering if it'd be possible for me to be assigned where their team's going, especially for districts. Since it's a 2-day, they're hoping that I can be a chaperone for the girls. I was just wondering if there would be any, if that's possible, if there's any issue with that.
So it's possible. The main thing is that what we want to make sure we don't create is a conflict of interest that's a visible conflict of interest. So for instance, like if the girls, I don't know if this is true for the District 2 girls, which is what Redmond's girls would be. I don't know that they're going to be co-located the boys at the Kinko at Juanita High School. If they were, that's probably great because there's just a whole jumble of people there.
Redmond's 4A, aren't they?
They are, but they're all going to Juanita. That's where all of those tournaments take place for Kinko. So
Kinko 4A is going to Oak Harbor this year.
okay, so
Yeah, that's what they were thinking.
that's the girls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking, yeah. So the thing is, that's what I'm saying. The girls aren't co-located with the boys.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I don't assign into Oak Harbor, although I do have to fill a slot. I can't remember where it's at. Up north to so we do have to support something over there. Like the thing is, if you go there and you're not like coaching them actively, I'm okay with it, and I think everybody else will be okay with it. Casey, that's the main thing.
Okay, thanks.
If you're just again there as a sort of a person that they could turn to and go, hey, this girl's having an issue, can you get a hold of her mom or whatever, like I think that would be okay. But not to sit in the corner in between your officiating assignments or be officiating them directly. That, you know, if you're in the role of coach. So if you're not in a role as coach, then if I assign you to a place, you basically should be officiating wherever they throw on your mat, because it might not be workable for you to go, well, I'm not going to officiate the Redmond girls, and now you're leapfrogging around, stepping off a mat every 2 minutes because there's a Redmond girl showing up on a mat every time you turn around.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, so we'll talk. We can talk about that separately. Okay.
Okay,
right.
Thanks.
Let's get into the training topic here. First training topic tonight is all about what is a match and knowing what the boundaries of a match are. And then what can we do to fix stuff that needs fixing, or what things could we address if there's an error, okay? So why does this matter? Well, for one reason, we as referees don't want to be part of contributing into an undesired match result, because it is possible that we could have corrected something. So we don't want to be part of like, hey, this kid loses, but we could have corrected it if we had the chance to fix an error of some sort, and then the right kid would have won. We don't want to be gee, the wrong kid won, and then they find out, well, you didn't do the right thing to try to look at the error and potentially fix it, and then maybe the right kid would have won. So that's the first reason. Second reason is that every sport has a mechanism for correcting errors and misapplication of the rules, but there are reasonable limits on that. So there are famous examples, for instance, those of you that are older might remember when the Colorado Buffaloes played Missouri the year that Colorado won the national title, and at the very last play of the game, they gave Colorado a 5th down. And in that 5th down, Colorado scored a touchdown, won the game. And then after the game was over, as people were like looking at the video, and they realized the referees had made a mistake and given them a 5th down, but the contest was over and they weren't overturning that 5th down. And so Colorado won that game. And ultimately, Colorado won the national championship that year because they were undefeated. So there are limits to, you can't go back like a week later and go, hey, wait a second, that guy was holding on that play. Like, now that touchdown doesn't count. Like, nope, there's a limit to when certain things can be corrected. So every sport has to deal with this, right? But it's not just open-ended or unlimited. Now, during high-stakes matches, and especially in postseason, we don't want to be the ones creating an injustice, okay? Like, that's the wrong time in a wrestler's life that we want to be part of something like that, okay? And then we also do not want to be breaking rules just to create an outcome that could be illegitimate just because we want to create that outcome. So don't be that referee that is just decided that this is how you want this to turn out. And so you're just going to ignore the rules and force an outcome that someone else could say, but the rule says this. And that you would go, well, yeah, like you just ignored that. Like, don't be that referee, okay? Sometimes there's an outcome that nobody will like, but it's the exact outcome that's dictated by the rules. And so you just need to be ready to explain that to everyone involved, okay? Like it could be a very unsatisfying sort of thing that people think, well, that's not really fair, or that other kid should have won, or whatever. Like, hey, the rules dictate that this is how we have to do it. My hands are tied. Like, as an example, we've seen situations, a lot of us, where some kid, the inferior kid, gets slammed in the semifinals of regionals, right? And he's on recovery time, and then he can't get up and he can't finish. And so he's going to win the match. And then even though the guy that slammed him was the two-time defending state champion, right? Like we know who the better wrestler was. He was beating him 12-0, like, but the kid can't get up. And so he wins because his recovery couldn't recover. And people think, well, that's not really fair. That kid that was laying down, like he actually wanted to give the match to the other kid anyway. It's like, hey, if he wanted to do that, he would have said, stop recovery time. Now I default. He wins. Like, he didn't do that. I'm sorry. The outcome, you don't like the outcome, but that's the outcome that the rules tell us, right? He wins by default himself because he got injured by an illegal hold, okay? So we just want you to be ready in the event that the outcome doesn't look like something people like, but that's the outcome that the rules would lead you to, okay? So the main thing here, keep in mind, know your rules. And then when these situations come up, just remain calm and collected. Like, if you know your rules and your procedures and you stay calm, it's just a matter of exercise, then applying the rules that you know that cover this stuff, okay? So let's walk it through by the numbers. So first thing is a match. This is like a visual I'm drawing for you. The match of period 1, 2, 3, right? And the things I want to sort of, and things are happening in each round, right? Each period, little events are going on, the wrestling, right? So the first thing is every period has a definitive start and end point. So that's just a basic. Period 1 starts at a certain moment and it ends at a precise moment, okay? The same with the start and end of a match. There is a precise moment at which the match started, and there's a precise moment at which it ends, okay? And you see the box. The box is the match. Like, nothing goes inside there that didn't happen in between those markers, okay? So these numbers you see on the scoreboard for a match score, they cannot be changed, and the score on the score sheet cannot be changed by anything that doesn't live inside that box I just drew. So that little thing that over to the right over there that, you know, happened after the third period, buzzer sounded, whatever that is, has no effect on the match score. Green won 2-1. And whatever that little thing was that happened over on the right side had nothing to do with ever changing. 2-1 is the score there, okay? So that's a principle. I just want you to keep in mind, like, there's a box around the match, and if something's not inside that box, it isn't part of the match score anymore, okay? We cannot insert something back into the box after the box is closed. So let's talk about correction of errors and what the rules that you need to be aware of are. So first one is Rule 6-2-2, and this is the rule that establishes the order that wrestlers are supposed to report to the table. It also tells you that when a wrestler can no longer withdraw without losing the match by disqualification. So basically, right, in the dual meets, we flip disc, captains pick odd or even, and then their team is required to report first. If they picked odd, they have to report first in the second period, or report first to the table for those odd matches, okay? So once somebody is required to report in because of the reporting order, if the coach goes, well, I want to pull this kid out, nope, that kid loses by disqualification now. Like, you can't do that. So that's what that rule tells us, right? Rule 5-17 is the rule that defines when a match begins and when the match concludes. So the box I drew you, it's the thing that tells you what the boundaries of the box are. Rule 5-7 defines what a default is. Whoops. Rule 5-8 defines a disqualification. Rule 5-11 defines a fall and a technical fall. Now, the reason I'm telling you these, referencing these, because Rule 5-17-2 tells you that the match concludes when default occurs, disqualification occurs, fall or technical fall occurs, right? Like when those things occur, the match concludes. You need to know then the definition of those outcomes so that you know precisely at that moment when the match has ended, okay? Rule 6-5-1 describes to you what happens when a decision occurs. And Rule 6-7 defines when overtime is necessary and how it's to be conducted. Rule 6-6 is where you'll find the correction of errors. It tells you how errors can be corrected in a match. Rule 5-1 tells you what bad time is and which events or offenses don't get wiped away by bad time. So there are some things that if they happen during bad time and we do not erase them, if you did something unsportsmanlike and then we declare, oh, well, that happened while it was bad time, we say, fine, all of the scoring or wrestling action that happened in bad time gets wiped away, but not that unsportsmanlike conduct. that stays with you. So 5-1 defines what those things are. And then there's always Rule 3-1-13. And I just printed it right here. The referee has the authority to rule promptly and in the spirit of good sportsmanship on any situation not specifically covered in the rules. In other words, if there isn't some rule you can point to that says, well, this guides us or tells us what to do in this situation, then as a referee, you have the authority to invoke this rule to say, I am going to say that in the spirit of good sportsmanship, this is what we should do. So every ruling you ever make should always be covered by a rule in the rule book. And when there isn't a rule that says, well, what happens if the red kid lands on top of their head and the other kid has got 2 feet in? Like, if there isn't something that tells you that, you will cite Rule 3-1-13 and say, that's the basis that I'm making this ruling. Every ruling has a rule behind it. And sometimes the catch-all is that rule, okay? One thing that's of interest is there is no definition for decision in the rules book. So there's a definition for what a fall is. Both shoulders in contact with the mat, 2 seconds, right? Like there isn't a definition for what a quote decision is. So when we define all these other outcomes, we don't define that one outcome. All right, here's some key principles or guidelines I want you to hold on to and apply when you're going to correct errors or try to get into situations where somebody's trying to correct an error. Like I said, in all sports, there has to be a definitive time when something is concluded. And in wrestling, you need to know with certainty when these things are concluded. You need to know when a scoring maneuver is completed. So when does that person earn the takedown? When is the near fall over? Like you need to know those things. When is a period done? When is the match done? When is a dual meet or a tournament done? You need to know those things so that you understand what the limits are to what can happen that affects that individual scoring maneuver or that period or that match or that event, whether it's a dual meet or tournament. Second principle here is there's a ruling in case 5.11.4b, okay, that tells you you need to apply your rulings in the order that the events happen. It would be better if this was actually in the rule book. I'm proposing a rule change to actually put some language like this in the rule book that says you must apply rulings in the order that events happen. Because believe it or not, I talk to people across the country and I listen to situations that they're describing, and then they start describing how they want to ignore some certain thing because they want to apply this other later thing first. Like that's totally breaks this concept, but there isn't a rule that says that you have to do it in that order. But this ruling in the case manual is basically telling you, use the common sense of, time and space. Go in the order that things happen, okay? anytime a coach wants to initiate a correction or a change in a ruling, it must begin with a coaches conference at the table. Do not settle for anything less. So if they go, oh, that's not a takedown, or hey, that wasn't a fall, like, you start by saying, are you asking for a conference? Yes, great. We're going to go to the table and have a conference. So per rules 5-5 and 6-6-6 and 7-5-4, then if you don't change the ruling, they get a coach misconduct. That's just the basics. It doesn't matter if they're nice. It doesn't matter if they had a conference and they say, all I wanted you to do is explain why that was a takedown. If you didn't change your ruling, they get a coach misconduct. That's why we ask them if they want to have a conference. And if they do, we're going to have the conference. And if we don't change the ruling, they're going to get a coach misconduct. Don't ignore or prejudge a coach's request for a conference. You may think in your mind, this is ridiculous. Why does this person want to have a conference about this? Doesn't matter. They ask for it, you give it to them. And then they will pay a price if it was ridiculous. But maybe it wasn't ridiculous. That's why you don't prejudge whatever their request is. You just go over there and hear what they're asking about in terms of a misapplication. And then you just decide on that thing that they have raised as the question and application of rule. A protest is not defined or envisioned in the NFHS rulebook. This is a state association construct. So the WIA allows protests of wrestling matches. The NFHS rules do not. The NFHS rules give us this previous thing we just talked about, which is a coach conference. You think the referee misapplied a rule? Go have a conference at the table. That's where you get to have your hearing. And if you win, the ruling gets changed and the right thing is done. And there's no penalty to you. If you're wrong, you, just like in football, you lose your red challenge flag and you get charged a timeout. There's a penalty, right? Like, so your choice. But the protest is something that the state association allows, which sometimes can break the rules or the construct of the NFHS rules. And I'll sort of hit on this maybe a little bit later, but this is defined by the state association. Now, what I'll tell you is whatever the protest procedures are that are established by your tournament director in conjunction with your head official, just comply with them. Okay. So just ensure though that wherever this is happening, that all of the coaches and referees have been briefed before the tournament starts. The wrong time to start discovering how to do a protest at that particular place is when you're in the middle of a problem. So, Michael, I see you asked a question. Coach misconduct, the first instance is a warning. The sequence goes warning, -1 team point, -2 team points, and you're ejected for the day. You can come back tomorrow if it's a multi-day tournament, but you're out for the rest of the day. That's the sequence. That's why they need to be careful and just pick their moment when they want to do those things, okay? You have your hand up, Lewis. What is it?
So just remember that if there ends up a protest in a match in a tournament and the protest is not upheld and the ruling is gone, the coach gets an automatic coach's misconduct warning because he's questioned your judgment.
That's what bullet point 3 was. Remember, any attempt for them to initiate a change or a correction started with a coach conference and a coach misconduct if you didn't change it. Now, if they protest, they already have the coach misconduct warning. If they win, we'll remove that. If they lose their protest, they already had the warning. But so we went through that procedure already.
Yeah, but the protest could be at the end of the match. It could be, hey.
But it still begins the same way. Because guess what? When they ask for a protest, if they want to protest something after the match ends, guess what? We're not wrestling the next match. So they're delaying the next match, which is why you go, are you asking for a conference? Yes, I am. Why? Because I want to protest whatever. Okay, fine. What do you protest? What do you want to change? I don't agree with you, coach. This was the rule. You get coach misconduct. I want to protest now. I want the head official over here and the tournament director. Okay, we're going to do that. You already have your coach misconduct warning. And now we'll just finish the protest. But it always starts by, that's why I tell you, it always starts by having a coach conference. You just have the conference. If you don't change the ruling, they have their misconduct. If they want to elevate that now to a protest, then we won't have to remember later, oh, I should give him a coach misconduct because he lost his protest. He already had the coach misconduct warning. Now he's just trying to win and get it off of him, but otherwise he already has it. So, and then do not start a subsequent match on the mat once a protest procedure begins. Same with any, even if it's not a protest, if they're having a conference about something, like in Lewis's example, the match just ended. Now the guy wants to go, well, that wasn't a takedown 10 seconds ago. With the last 10 seconds of the match, that wasn't a takedown. Like, we're going to have a conference about that. Meanwhile, we are not starting any subsequent matches on that mat. So we're not, by rule, in rule 6-6, right? Like, we can only correct errors. This is NFHS rules. We can only correct errors before the next match has started. Once the next match starts, it's off. We can't correct the error anymore. So that's why you don't allow wrestling to continue on the mat until this thing is decided, okay? All right. And then, like we said, if the coach wins their protest, now you'll just rescind the coach misconduct that they got along with that previously. So that's good, clean hygiene when you run these things. You run you have the coach conference first. You issue a coach misconduct if they didn't win that conference. They do a protest. They lose the protest. You don't have to worry about it. They win the protest. You rescind the coach misconduct, because now what you're being told by your head official and your tournament director is the committee is overruling you. They're telling you that the coach was right and you were wrong, and so now you have to remove that coach misconduct. Okay. All right. So let's go through illustration here of a match. So I show you a picture at the beginning of a box. That was a match. Here's how the box gets constructed, right? At the start of the match, wrestler reports to the scores table. So in a tournament situation, there is no order in which one reports first or not. The moment that wrestler reports to the scores table, that match just began for that kid. Okay. So the left boundary line of our match box just got drawn for that kid because he just reported in. Now they're shaking hands. We're blowing the whistle. Wrestling actions beginning, right? So there's a little event like starting to build up in our box. Like, they're wrestling. Takedown for red. Okay, great. 2-0 red. That's another moment. We'll put that in the box for the first period. Green escape. 2-1 now. That's in the first period. Takedown by green. Okay, 3-2 green. First period. First period ends. Boom. We draw a box now. We draw the right side of the box for the first period. First period's over. We just drew that line. So nothing goes inside the first period box anymore. Second period begins. Reversal by red. Okay,
Question.
Great. 4-3 red. Yeah, what's the question?
Right now, since second period just started, we cannot change any of the scores in the first period, right?
We might, but we only change it based off of an event that's in the first period already.
So a clarification and go, oh yeah, they're wrong. We can fix it then. We can fix
Correct.
it at any time. Okay.
We can fix it within a limit. So you'll
Right.
see
It's
this
like,
come
wait, hey,
around.
where's the near fall? Well, oh yeah, there was a near fall. I do remember, blah, blah, blah. You correct it. We move forward.
Like an example would be like, not that this has happened to any of us, but like you say, like the period ends and then the coach goes, where's the near fall? And they go, there is no near fall. I only got a 10 count. And the guy goes, I know, 5 count. We got a 3-point near fall, right? Oh, you know what? Gosh, you're right. I thought he had to get a 20 count. Okay, like, yes, 3 near fall for green or whatever. So we can only act on the things that are inside that box, though. Okay. So second period, reversal red, great, 4-3 red. Escape by green. Second period ends, great. Draw the line. The box is closed for second period now. Third period, we got an escape by green. There's an almost takedown, and they go out of bounds with 40 seconds left. Okay, that goes in our little box. Stalling on red, 1 point for green. It ties the match at 6. Third period ends. Boom. Now we got a box around the third period. So we have our little collection of events in each period, right? Sudden victory.
So
Takedown by
did we have
Green.
the first stalling? I didn't hear the first stalling.
This isn't 100% exhaustive, Gary.
Okay.
This is just illustrative. Of, there are all sorts of other events you don't see here either. But so at any rate, sudden victory. Green gets a takedown. Match concludes. Boom. Box is now complete for the match, right? We've got the whole match box. Nothing else goes inside this box. So end of match ceremony. The first, as they're getting up, the winning wrestler shoves the opponent in the face, and then as they're doing a handshake, he's verbalizing, "Hey, Red, you're effing lucky I didn't pin your ass." So this is happening during, the handshake ceremony, but it's outside the box. Okay, so there's sort of an illustration of a match, construction. So now let's do some scenarios, and we're gonna test based off of what you just sort of saw. We'll test some things. So scenario number 1, we're going to have a post-match protest of a third round ruling. So handshake ceremony's done, raising somebody's hand. Suddenly the coach wants to protest the almost takedown in round 3. Hey, that was a takedown in round 3. Like this, my kid should have won in regulation. How do you proceed? So let me. Okay, Lewis, you got your hand up. Why don't you answer? How do we proceed from here?
Sorry, Coach. We've already gone one period past that at that point. If you had a disagreement on calls, as soon as the out of bounds or situation had been finished, you needed to be at the table right then. We don't recoup points in past periods because period is a box, and we finished that box and we moved on to another box. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow your challenge for that. We're done.
All right, so pretty close. Generally the right answer. So what I would say is this: first thing, coaches conference, right? If he's over there in the corner, hey, that wasn't a takedown in the third round, and he's going over to the table, and we say, are you asking for a conference? He says yes. Okay, great. Go have your conference. Per rule 5-1-1, if we were to actually change that ruling in the third period, that would result in bad time, right? Because after the out of bounds, we restarted them in neutral position. They would have been starting in referee's position. So rule 5-1-4 says we need to have corrected anything that deals with bad time prior to the start of the next period. So there's your rule-based reason why we can't just go back into the first period potentially and undo something after the match is already over, because now we can't play the Marvel Universe alternate universe game of, well, gosh, what would have happened if he had those 40 seconds where he was on top and he was ahead by 2 now? We don't know. That's why the rules are so strict about this, because like Lewis said, if you had a problem with that almost takedown, you should have been going to the table for a conference at 40 seconds left in the third period to say, hey, I want to have a conference. About what? About that. That was a takedown. And then we would adjudicate that. And if we had to fix it, we would fix it. And then we would put the guys in referee's position and they would wrestle the last 40 seconds that way. I don't know that the guy in bottom wouldn't have gotten a Granby roll 5-point move for all I know. But we don't know. And that's why there's a limit here. So in this case, we can't change the ruling. We're going to give them a coach misconduct warning, boom. And then if he protests, then we just invoke the protest procedure. And I'm just going to leave it at that because we don't know. Again, the protest will go through whatever it goes through. You as an individual referee on that mat have made your decisions based off of the rules. And you've followed clean hygiene on rules and your procedures. Now, if the tournament committee comes in and then wants to overturn something, that might be out of your control. But all you're going to do is, if they want to protest, you're just going to follow that protest procedure that was agreed upon for that tournament, okay? Scenario 2. Here we've got questioning the takedown call in round 3. So, third period, the out of bounds, 40 seconds left. Now the coach asked for a conference about that almost takedown. Hey, that was a takedown. The assistant ref saw this and felt like there was control and that both feet finished in contact with the boundary line. How do you proceed? Who wants to take this one on?
Bob, I'll take it.
Okay, go for it, Michael.
All righty. So what you do is you have the kids or you have the wrestlers sit in the middle, and then you go have a conference with your assistant referee, and you ask what he saw, and it's still the head official's job to decide if he's going to accept that or not. If he does,
Okay.
go ahead and make that change, correct it, and then move on. And if there's been wrestling, let's see here. If there in this situation there wasn't any need for bad time because he stopped it right before the restart, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so there's no bad time. So yeah, go ahead and correct it and move forward.
Excellent. Perfect. So again, the thing is, we're going to have a coaches conference first. That's our hygiene, right? Let's have a conference. Then you're going to learn from the coach what he's asking in terms of misapplication. So we're not prejudging, right? Like you may think, oh, he's going to question this takedown call. You don't know. He might be going, that kid was doing an unsportsmanlike thing. He keeps putting his hand in my kid's eye or whatever. Like you might be wanting to ask you about something different. So you're going to have the conference. You're going to find out from him what he wants to know. In this case, he's going to say, hey, I think that was a takedown. Like Michael says, I have an assistant referee. That's where I should look at my assistant referee and say, okay, hey, let me consult my assistant first. We'll step aside, step away from everybody. Those conversations that the assistant and the ref on the whistle are going to have should be between the two of them, not overheard by other coaches or the kids or anything, because we don't want them to, maybe hear one word or misinterpret something that was said and go, see, he said that I really got the takedown or whatever. That's not what I said. So we're going to go do that privately. And in that consultation, then, like Michael said, if you as the ref on the whistle agree, then you know what? Award the takedown, and we're going to resume the match with the wrestlers in referee's position. If you disagree, because you're on the whistle and that's your prerogative, then you're just going to issue the coach misconduct and restart them in neutral position. I will tell you this, that when we have an assistant referee, and we don't have it very often, right? Like 98% of the time, we are not working with an assistant referee. So we're not in a habit of, leveraging our assistant. Use your assistant. If for no other reasons, the optics are always good. Like when coaches see that, okay, hold on, coach, I'm going to talk to the assistant. Like they're going to be relieved that good, two heads come together and they're going to come up with hopefully the best or right decision. So use that assistant if you have them, get their input. Even if you're convinced that, look, this is a bogus, conference or whatever, you know what? Just go, let me talk to my assistant real quick. Boop. Again, the optics look good that, yep, the assistant agrees with me. No takedown. And then here's coach misconduct on you. And then let's go resume in neutral position. Okay. All right. Scenario 3, questioning the takedown call in sudden victory. So takedown gets awarded in sudden victory. We blow the whistle and raise, and now we're shaking hands and we're raising somebody's hand. So we've gotten as far as like they're shaking hands. We're actually raising someone's hand, and at that point, the losing wrestler like storms off the mat and like boom makes a beeline into the concession stands or the locker room or someplace. He just disappears, right? The losing coach, meanwhile, goes, "Hey, that wasn't a takedown." So. Meanwhile, your assistant ref, you haven't talked to him yet, but what they saw, they didn't believe that control was established. So you gave a takedown, and your assistant is kind of looking at that and thought, well, I didn't really think that was a takedown myself. So how do you proceed? I see Max has got his hand up. So Max, I'm going to let you have the floor.
In this case, because if you overturned your call, it would require a continuation of wrestling. And because the wrestler has left the match, you cannot overturn it.
Perfect.
How do we proceed though? First, we let him have his conference. Yes. Then I give him that exact ruling that I just gave. After the match is over, is that I guess that would still be a coach misconduct. Yes.
Well, that's a kind of a tricky one, right? Because
I usually wouldn't just personally because I just want to get the next one going, but because it's usually pretty quick. But
so you're correct, right? Like first we're going to have the conference, right? Then we're going to determine what is the misapplication this coach is asking about. And in this case, he's saying that wasn't a takedown. You're going to confer with your assistant ref, and you may agree that the takedown wasn't earned. You might think, yeah, he wasn't down on the mat beyond reaction time or whatever. You might, for whatever reason, you might start to believe your assistant ref, right? So, but like Max said, more wrestling's required. So guess what? By Rule 6-6-5, this correction had to be made before the offended wrestler left the mat area. This is one of those practical realities because, like, we can't say, you know what, I am going to take the takedown away. Where's this other kid? Like, we want to get restarted. Oh, he was so upset he ran out of the Tacoma Dome and got in his car, took off. I don't know. Like he has to hang around. And because he didn't, we can't change the result of the match. Now, the thing is, there's a practical reality here around whether or not you're going to give a coach misconduct or not. Because you agreed with the coach, I wouldn't give it. You might not tell him that you were taking the takedown away. So if you want to just sort of get out of this situation, you just say, hey, coach, by Rule 6-6-5, like, you had to ask for this when your wrestler's still around. Because if we were to remove this, we have to keep wrestling. And the rule requires that he has to stay in the mat area. If that's the ruling, he's not here. I can't even rule on this now. And I'm just going to let him, we're just going to end it. I'm not going to give him a coach misconduct. Just, that's it. Like he lost his, thing. You got your hand up, Gary. Go ahead.
Yeah. What if the winning wrestler has left the mat, but he's still, on the gym floor?
So the winning wrestler is not required to hang around. So
the winning one doesn't have to.
Correct.
No, only the offended wrestler.
Okay.
Yeah, because this is one of those things that's a little bit weird because
we changed the decision. We have to get him back on the mat then.
True. But the thing is,
okay,
I won. I'm not required to hang around. Like, boom, I'm out of there. Like, now it's a very extraordinary situation if we were to actually overturn a call that would require more wrestling and the kid isn't there because, the coach is going to go, okay, wait a second. If they don't give this takedown, we got to resume wrestling. Like, the coaches would know the situation. They'd be like, hey, Gary, stay here. Keep warming up. Stay warm. Like, like we may have to keep wrestling. So I think that they would prevent the winning kid from taking off if they knew that more wrestling might be required. But it's a very extraordinary circumstance. And they don't put the restriction on the winner to hang around. They do on the loser because the loser is trying to overturn something. And we don't want to say, yeah, I'm going to overturn it. And now it's like, where the hell's the kid that wanted this overturned in the first place? Like, he's not even here. Like,
coach is, but right.
All right, Michael, question.
So the rule states that it's the offended wrestler's got to stick around, but if the other wrestler takes off and he just hides and doesn't come back, what if you agree? Okay, we're gonna have bad time. Can we tell the coach, hey, he's got 5 minutes to get here, or he forfeits, or
that it would be a very extraordinary situation, but I would probably take an approach like that, Michael, which is like, okay, your guy wasn't required to hang around, but coach, come on. Like, you knew that if we took that takedown off the board, like, we're going to continue wrestling. Like, you have 5 minutes to get this kid back. Like, because we can't sit there for like, well, gee, he's gone. Like, he went home. Like, this was the semifinal match and finals are, 4 hours from now. And so he went home. He lives, 10 minutes from the Tacoma Dome and he went home to go take a nap and get something to eat. Like, we can't just let that. That's so extraordinary. At some point, like, we have to have a limit because we couldn't say, well, we'll wait for him to show up. When? Like, I don't know when he's going to be here. So that'd be very weird, though. All right, scenario 4. Yeah.
Before we move on, so just out of curiosity, is the offended wrestler off of the mat when they leave the circle to shake the coach's hand, or when they are off the mat completely, like they're back on their own team's side?
So they have to remain in the mat area. The mat area includes the area like the benches and a dual meet, or the corner, the scorers table. Like, it's an area around them. You don't have to stand on the mat. They just need to be in that mat area, which is that area that's sort of that 10 feet basically around the mat where the scorers table could be and the benches. Yeah, so don't anybody be like so strict to go, oh, sorry, coach, your kid's standing on the hardwood floor. Like, If he's standing there, he's in the mat area.
Okay, gotcha. Thank
All
you.
right. That's a good question, though. Good clarification, because sometimes coaches don't know. They're like, stand inside the circle or whatever. They think like they're, like the kid can't like leave the 28-foot circle or something. It's like, he can be in the corner with you, coach, or he can stand next to the scores table. Like that's okay. Like he just can't, again, disappear off to the bleachers or the locker room or something. All right, scenario 4, last scenario here. They're going to ask for a couple of unsportsmanlike conduct match points to tie the match up. So final whistle, right? And we remember that sort of shove that the winner gave into the loser's face, and then what he said to the loser as they were raising his hand, right? That stuff occurred. Now the losing wrestler again storms off the mat and he disappears. So he's in a huff and he's gone. The losing coach is saying, hey, that's twice he disrespected my wrestler. And so the losing coach wants to have 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties assessed against that other kid for 2 match points to tie it up so they can resume wrestling.
Team points.
So who wants to take this scenario on? Casey Morehouse, I want you to take this scenario. What happens here? My kid just lost, but that other kid shoved him in the face and said, "Hey, you effing idiot!" Like to my kid, and I want 2 points. Let's tie it up and have him keep wrestling. What are you gonna do here?
Conference.
Casey, you're on mute. Can you hear me? Going once, going twice. Jeremy, you were just on the speaker a moment ago. We're gonna turn it over to you.
Oh, is that the tones going off? I gotta go. So the match is concluded. I believe that you would hit the kid with the unsportsmanlike conduct and match points, but
Team points.
am I reading the scenario wrong?
Well, the coach is asking you to assess 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties and tie the match up 8-8.
But the match is concluded at that point, correct?
Yes.
Well, you see where the event is that that is the one in question here. Henry, you got your hand up.
I was just going to ask, since it's over, wouldn't that be team points instead of match points?
Yes. So in this scenario, right, going to have a coach conference again. Remember your hygiene. Right. He wants to have a ruling change. Oh, great. We start with a coach conference. He's going to talk about these acts that happen outside of the box, right? The match is over, like Jeremy and Henry are saying. We can't insert something into the match now to put more points on the match score. Match ended 8-6. Now these 2 stupid things were done by the winner, but they happened outside the boundaries of the match. So any unsportsmanlike conduct penalties are going to be team points, not match points in this case. And so go ahead and award whatever unsportsmanlike conduct stuff you feel is appropriate, but there's no re-wrestling required. So just because the wrestler left, that doesn't have any impact on this ruling in this case. Like he doesn't need to be hanging around for you to levy 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties on the winner. Now, if that happened, actually, the winner would be ejected out of the tournament. 2 unsportsmanlike conducts when you're not a contestant, whether you're a coach or a non-participating wrestler or whatever, you are now ejected from the event. But at any rate, all that stuff happens as you see in the little red box there. That stuff's outside the box of the match, so it has nothing to do with the match score at this point. Okay, so those are our scenarios.
Just in general, would we consider the shoving and the verbalization 2 separate things, or would that just be? That's
yes,
just
because the first thing happened as they were just getting up.
Okay, all right.
And then they went over to the circle. You were raising his hand. That's when he said,
and then
Brad, you're effing lucky I didn't pin your ass.
Yeah, 2 things.
Yeah. All right. Max, you have your hand up still, or am I reading that right?
So if there was a incident in college just a few days ago where there were two, like after the match, like they went into double overtime. One wrestler, or maybe a single, they're in overtime. One wrestler finishes something, gets the points. So the match is technically over. Now I know that college wrestling and high school wrestling could potentially have different rules on this one, but I just wanted to know if this happened here. And then the two wrestlers start shoving each other as they're swinging around. He strikes the ref, even if it was accidentally struck the ref. Gets a flagrant misconduct at that moment. But then the referee raises the hand of the other guy, like because as a disqualification.
Yeah.
And it strikes me as that's not what we would do. We would still have the winning wrestler be declared the winner and then ejected for flagrant misconduct, and the losing wrestler would still have the loss on the match. Would that be correct?
Correct. So the college rule is different from what I understand. I don't do college. Kale does. So Kale's saying that's the NCAA rule. But yes, in NFHS rules, right? Now that match is over, anything that happens after that, the winner was decided, and Green or whatever won the match 8-6. Now, if Green did some flagrant act, or in our scenario here, 2 unsportsmanlike and then got ejected, like he wouldn't be able to wrestle anymore. Like if he got the flagrant, he would lose all of his points he had earned, any placing, right? Like he never existed in the tournament, and he wouldn't move on in the tournament. But the loser wouldn't take his spot. The loser still loses the bout and falls to consolation or gets eliminated if it was a consolation bout. So, yeah, that's why we have to understand, again, these boundaries of, when things are done, and then how we might be able to potentially correct something when the coach is requesting a ruling to be changed. What are the limits of that? How do we handle it? And then how do we handle it properly? So again, we do not create an outcome which is an illegitimate outcome, isn't supported by the rules, or that we are somehow doing something that we do an injustice to some kid, okay? So conclusion here, be prepared for these situations in advance, like know your rules. Think about these things in advance as we approach the postseason here, right? Head officials, make sure you cover the protest protocol in detail during the pre-tournament coaches meeting. So I do this all the time. Those of you who are when I'm the head official, I always say, who's tournament director, who's on the protest committee? Okay, me, you, and these 2 coaches, great. And then, and then here's how we're going to do protests. And then I line it out for everybody so that officials and coaches understand, if someone's doing a protest, this is how this will work. Head official and tournament committee decisions, like I said before, are outside your control. Accept what they rule. Even they may rule wrong, and that does happen. It happened at the state tournament in the 160-pound 4A final last year. The head official met with the WIA wrestling guy and the official after the bout had ended, and decided to insert a technical violation into the match after the bout was already over to tie the match up and send it into overtime. Totally wrong decision, but the official on the mat, just has to sort of accept what they do, because that's sort of like the Supreme Court, right? Even if you think they're wrong, but if you knew they were wrong, you should push back on them. So you should say, if I knew they were wrong, and I would say, I'm going to show you Rule 7-6 says this right here. You guys are contradicting that, or whatever. I'm just going to point it out to them, and they may still tell me, too bad, Bob. We are the Supreme Court, and we say that this one flies. All right, but I'm not just going to be a passive participant in that if I know that what they were ruling was wrong, okay? But at the end of the day, that's how the hierarchy and the structure works. So protest happens, you have to comply with what they rule. And then, like I said, when you have an assistant ref, get their input. And assistant refs, be ready to make any call in a match, because your input matters. What I hate is when I'm at tournaments and, number one, whoever's the head official doesn't have a briefing for people on how we will do assistant referee mechanics. So they do not brief the crew on the 2-man mechanics. And now you get these wide variations of what an assistant's even doing or thinks they're supposed to do. Number 2, I detest when I see assistant referees who aren't paying attention or aren't ready or aren't engaged enough to go, oh, you want my opinion? No takedown, Bob. Why not? Because he didn't have 2 supporting points in. Like, you should know that stuff. You shouldn't go, oh, gee, I don't know, or I didn't have the angle. Like, don't cop out. Like, just go, this is what I saw. And this is, you want to know what I would rule? No, I'd say no control. Like, okay, great. Like, you're a qualified official. I want your input. So, assistant refs, be ready. Like, we don't want to be in a position where you're the assistant ref and then you're not doing your part, okay? Last line, don't become the next horror story. So that horror story I just told you about, the state finals in the 4A at 160 pounds last year, like, we don't want to be that person, because that's all people were talking about at the end of the Matt Classic last year, that match got all screwed up. So we don't want to be a part of that. So that's the end of this. Jeremy, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so actually, I'm not gonna lie, I made a bad call or a bad no call the other day, and I was hoping you could touch on like what the assistant referee is supposed to do for myself and for the newer referees on, like, for cautions or stuff that's not necessarily in the rule book that would help out the main referee.
Okay, so what I would say is this: like, when you are an assistant, and again, depends on what the tournament head official or the person you're working with have briefed. Okay, like when I brief for assistant official 2-man mechanics, and I tell them, I want your input. I want you 180 degrees away. If you have something to share with me, come around to my side and say to me discreetly, like, hey, Bob, that's the 3rd time in a row red shot a takedown or whatever. I think green stalling, like, watch green, like he's putting his finger in the guy's eye, whatever. Like, I want him to tell me that stuff, okay, so that I can do something about it. What we don't want to do, though, is make sure that when you're an assistant, you don't do something like you go, oh crap, like, Bob, that's 2. Like you're yelling it across the wrestlers or something like you. So we want to make sure that we're not creating a bad situation because of the input you want to give, and then make sure for input, like, let's say where it's not something that's consequential. So say like a starting position violation, where it's like kids' knee is touching the butt in the back, and you see that because you're on the opposite side, right? And maybe the guy in the front isn't seeing that. You're not gonna like stop the match or go, hey, caution, like, you're not gonna throw your C up or whatever, but you might then sort of circle around at some point to say, yeah, watch that top kid, he's putting his knee up against his butt when they in the starting position. Like, give him the input, but you're not gonna make a big show of it. But if it's something like an illegal hold, right, you are gonna call attention to that. Like, I brief my assistant officials, like, if you see an illegal hold, just tell me and I'm going to blow the whistle, even if I don't see it, because you're a certified official too. I have to trust you. You saw something that I didn't see, I'm just going to call it. That's how it works,
Sure.
right?
So my question would be, as the just get the scenario out there to everybody. I didn't call for illegal 3rd caution to the head referee, and I missed that, and I should have let them know, I believe. Now, so I was like trying to do that. It's overtime. The guy shot in early, and I should have called that to the other referee, I believe. Is that correct?
Okay. Yes. Like, so that
knowing
is
now, right?
consequential,
Looking back at it.
Yeah, that is what you just described is consequential. So if we're in the 2nd period lining up for the first time, and then that kid again has his knee up against the butt of the defensive wrestler, like, and this would be his first caution. Again, we're not going to, like, jump in the middle of it all and go, well, don't blow the whistle yet. He's look what he's doing. But in your situation where it's a 3rd caution, that's supposed to be a point. We're in sudden victory. That's the end of the match, right? That wins the match. So in that case, if you aren't calling attention to it at that moment, like, very visible way, you're certainly going to let the person on the whistle know, hey, he jumped before you blew the whistle. Now, the reason you want to not make a scene out of it while wrestling's going on is, number one, you don't want to distract the ref who's on the whistle. Number 2, they may have seen whatever you saw, and for whatever reason they might say, no, Jeremy, like, he didn't, like, I didn't see it that way, or whatever. Like, but you're going to make sure that they have your input, because that was consequential. That, hey, that should be a point. Like, sudden victory is over. The guy who false started, like, he loses. That was his third time. So make sure your person on the whistle knows that, so that hopefully we want to get the right outcome. So we don't want to be in a situation where we go, well, I didn't call that, and then the other kid got a takedown. So the wrong kid
For
won
sure.
in a sense. Matt, you have your
I
hand
appreciate you clarifying that as a new
Yeah.
referee. Thank you.
Go ahead,
Thanks for
Matt.
asking, Jeremy.
Yeah, Bob, I've got two really good examples of assistant refereeing from this weekend. So with Lono, who, by the way, is just an absolute terrific new referee for us.
Agreed.
Absolutely terrific. Anyway, so the first situation was I called a takedown, and then by the time I got around, I saw that the kid had a headlock on. And so I gave the 2 takedown and then awarded 1 point for an illegal hold. So Lono grabbed, very discreetly grabbed me and said, hey, he took him down. I was on the wrong side. He said, hey, he took him down with the headlock. I said, awesome, thanks for letting me know. Wiped out the takedown, still gave the penalty point, and it just was seamless. A perfect scenario of where the assistant referee did exactly what he was supposed to do. Then another situation, flip side, he's the head referee, and 2 very, very good kids going at it in the finals. And there's one of these bang, bang reversals, right at the buzzer. And he looks up to me and says, you got 2 on that? And I nodded yes. And so immediately within, a half of a second, we agreed that it was a reversal. Boom, he flashes the 2. Again, seamless, excellent assistant refereeing in both cases.
That's great examples. Thanks for sharing those, Matt. That was perfect. That's exactly the kind of behavior we want the assistant referee to demonstrate, and it's exactly the way we want 2 people to work together during a match. Like especially in that last example of before you have to make that critical call. Like I'm guilty of this. I did this one time at a regional tournament about 10 years ago. Winner to state, loser out. This is like the most important match at regionals, right? And Yelm kid is losing by a point to the Enumclaw kid. There's like inside of 10 seconds. The Yelm kid gets around behind standing, so there's kind of a standing duck under. He sort of trips him forward. The Enumclaw kid puts that hand down, but is right back up, and I'm like signaling 2 for green, and then out of bounds, and there's like 3 seconds left. And then I realize, oh, I have an assistant official here. And I look at, I go, Steve, you got 2 also? And he goes, no. And I go, okay, and then we chatted for a couple of seconds. He goes, Bob, he wasn't down beyond reaction time. He just touched that hand and came right back up. And I go, you're right. No takedown. This kid from Yelm isn't going to state now because with 3 seconds left on the restart, the other guy just call their time, and then 3 seconds goes by and it's over, right? But that's an example of how I was not using my assistant. Lono did exactly the model thing. He looks at you and goes, before I make this controversial or decisive call, Matt, you're there too. What do you got? You got 2? I got 2. That's 2 reversal. Boom.
Right.
No question.
And as the assistant referee, you got to feel that he's going to need your input on it. So be immediately ready to go ahead and give him the head nod or, or the 2 or, whatever it is. And again, make it happen right now. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that other point that Matt just made goes back to harkens to what I said is as an assistant, you have to be ready to make every call because there is that moment. Lono looks at Matt shouldn't go, oh, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Or, oh, how, I don't know, Lono, what do you think?
Or sorry, I didn't see it.
Yeah. That's a cop out, right?
Yeah.
Because if you didn't see it, it means you weren't doing your job.
Exactly.
All right. No, that's great examples. So I've got a second training. It's 7:43. So this next training will take about 45 minutes though. So either I can give this and people can hang on, and I'm going to record it. So anybody that doesn't hang on could sort of watch the replay if they want to see the rest of it, or we could put this off to our next meeting. It's on stalling. what's the sentiment here? Charge forward and go overtime by probably half an hour?
I'm good
I
with
get a
that.
no from
Lewis needs
Lewis.
to go to bed.
No thanks.
What's that? Who's a yes? Give me a verbal or a thumbs up or something if you're a yes. I mean, I know Lewis is in the Eastern time zone, so he's a no. Next
Yes.
meeting, we got a yes. Got a next meeting. Got a couple hands up. We got a split audience, so I'm gonna say no. We won't do it tonight. We'll do it next time. But I do want to cover this training. I gave it to the officials around the state 2 years ago, and it's on stalling. And the key thing is like with this kind of stuff around correction of errors and with stalling, these are like two areas where we're going to be involved in a lot of controversy potentially when we do certain things or make certain calls. And I want us to be prepared so that number one, we again don't make a procedural mistake. So that's what this training that we just did. Like, I just want you to be clean procedurally and rule wise so that you again aren't contributing to some bad or wrong outcome. And then with stalling, I want you to be prepared because there's going to be all this sort of pressure on you from, in a high stakes match of, hey, he's stalling, or how come you hitting my kid for stalling? You didn't hit, like, you're going to hear that crap. And they're high stake matches, and you're kind of going to feel some pressure of, should I, or, like, I just want you to be ready with your approach to how you view stalling and how you apply it so that you're applying it the same way, whether you're watching Chief Self versus Ingram or Mercer Island versus Mount Si or the 2-time state champion versus the 3-time state champion. I don't care what it is, or the JV tournament at Kentwood, whatever it is, I want you to feel comfortable that your approach, like, you're just going to keep sort of applying how you apply stalling consistently so that you don't suddenly change it because it's like, oh, now that we're at the state tournament on day 2, I should like change how I do this. Don't change how you officiate just because you think that there's more pressure or whatever, that somehow someone else has expectations. Like, if you think you should call stalling harder, call it harder tomorrow. Like, don't there's no need to wait for postseason, right? If you think you're too strict, back it down now so that you're doing it the same way when you get into postseason. Max, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Go for
would
it.
it be possible to would it be possible to send the PowerPoint or however the presentation is out to the membership so we could peruse it and then discuss it at the next meeting? Because I would like to see what it has to say, especially since we're near the end of the season at this point. So if we wait till the next one, we're going to be in the next season,
Yeah. Let's do this. Let me spend a few minutes just to go through the preparatory part, right? And then I'll send it out because they're just like this last one, right? There's some scenarios too to just sort of gauge where people are at with it. Because for me, there isn't always just a one right answer to stuff. What's more important to me is what's your rationale behind why you are ruling the way you are, okay? Because we can come up with different rulings sometimes, but as long as we're both supported by rule, there is some room for variation, okay? So if this goes a few minutes beyond 8, those of you that have to drop, just drop. But I'll cover sort of the first part. I won't get into the scenarios, okay? So this is the training on stalling. I call it stalling fundamentals, okay? And not like I'm teaching you how to stall. I'm teaching you how to view and officiate stalling. Okay. So this session, the thing I'm trying to do is make sure we all have a common understanding of what stalling is, and then give you some guiding principles for how you apply the rules on stalling, okay? I won't cover the agenda items. We'll just get into it here. So common complaints, right? Like, we've heard these. We hear from coaches. Every referee calls it differently. Gary was here last week and he did this, and Bob, you're doing it this way, different tonight. Hey, my kid was an aggressor all match long, and then he gets dinged for stalling twice in the last 15 seconds. Hey, how come my wrestler's being punished for being ahead by 1 point in the final seconds? My guy's chasing them all around the mat. When are you going to hit their kid for stalling? Right? Like, these are the kind of things we hear all the time, right? And they're not wrong. Like, we do have variations in how people call stalling. So Let's start with this question. What's the NFHS definition of stalling? Does anybody know? It's a trick question. There isn't one. So just like there's no definition of decision, there's no definition of stalling. We use this term all the time, but there's no definition that says stalling is. So I'll give you a definition based off of what you can infer from the publications. And it's this: stalling is the absence of aggressive wrestling. There's two causes for this. One is that you are not attempting to improve your position or score. So you're just being passive, basically. You're not trying to do anything. The second is you're preventing me from being aggressive. We see this when, you break a kid down and you got like both legs wrapped around his legs and hooked upward, so the kid can't even get to his base anymore, but you're not doing anything. You're just laying on him. So you're preventing him from being aggressive. So what is aggressive wrestling? Well, aggressive wrestling is action that's intended to improve your position or advance you towards scoring, okay? So giving these principles, I want you to keep these things in mind. So in the book, rules 5-24 and 7-6 are what defines stalling. The thing I want to call out to you is that sentence 1 in rule 7-6 says basically stay in the 10-foot circle. If you can be in there, that's where you're supposed to be, okay? And then it tells you also that they're supposed to wrestle aggressively regardless of position or time remaining or score, which means there's no such thing as situational stalling. If you ever hear someone talk about situational stalling, shut that stuff down, because the rules don't say, oh, well, because the kid's ahead by a point and there's only 10 seconds left, then you need to be harsher on him. No, you don't. You just need to be the same way you were when there was 10 seconds into the match and there's 5 minutes and 50 seconds left. Like, it isn't based off of the position or time remaining. It's based off of what you see or don't see, okay? And then the rule tells us we're expected to enforce stalling. So we're an important component of it. We shouldn't allow this to, fester in the sport. The casebook manual, cases 7.6.1 through 7.6.6, will give you specific situations where they say, here's how you should view or handle stalling, okay? All right, what does stalling do, right? Like I always use this teeter-totter as an illustration. Green, let's say, is the superior wrestler over red, and each of those blocks is just sort of a illustrative way to say green just has more weapons in his arsenal. He's more skilled, he's better shape, whatever. Like, and so the competitive balance tips towards green, right? He's just better. Like in your visual here, he's got 5 blocks and the other guy's got 2, so the teeter-totter tips, right, in green's favor. Doesn't mean green's going to win. Just means green has a better chance to win. But what does stalling do? Well, if red is allowed to avoid risk, then the scales start to tip less towards green. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking away advantages or weapons that green has and giving red now a better chance of winning. So red's chances of winning are improving, not because red got better, but because we kind of hampered green, is what was really happening. So in the visual, we're kind of removing some of green's advantages by allowing red to stall. And now the competitive balance is starting to tilt towards red a little bit more, and it shouldn't be. Like, we shouldn't allow that to happen. So the way I always sort of think about this, right, is imagine if an NFL team is playing a college team on a muddy field, and we let the college team wear cleats, but we make the pros wear flip-flops. The college team's chances of winning improve because the NFL team's hampered, not because the college team was better, okay? That's what happens when we let stalling happen. We're giving the inferior wrestler, in some cases, a better chance to win than they should have. So here's some operating guidelines. Keep in mind this stuff when you're thinking about stalling. First thing, have a consistent standard. Like I said, don't call stalling differently in the last 10 seconds of a match than you did in the first 10 seconds. If you think that it's wrong for a guy to sprawl when somebody shoots a double leg on him, fine, hit him in the first 10 seconds of the match when his opponent does that to him. But don't let that be the first time you call stalling. The first time he ever sprawls with 10 seconds left and ahead by 1, and now you're going to hit him for stalling? Like, come on, be consistent. Second thing I will propose to you is have a bias in your mind that the wrestlers are being aggressive. In other words, the way I state this is see stalling, but don't look for it. if you in your mind think, well, this guy is going to stall, or I think he wants to stall, like you're going to start looking for it. You're going to start rationalizing in your mind why you should call stalling on somebody versus just take the assumption that they're just both wrestling and they're trying to be aggressive. Sometimes they don't know any better. They're not very good wrestlers, whatever, but don't start with the assumption that they want to stall. Just start with that they're being aggressive and then watch what's happening. And if you see stalling, fine, you're going to call it, but don't be looking for it. Observations, not intent. That's what you base your rulings on. So again, you don't say, well, there's only 10 seconds left and he's trying to run out the clock. Like, that may be true. Like any smart wrestler, that might be true. But the thing is, we're not going to base our ruling based off of what I think is going on in his head. I'm going to base it off what I see. Is he just like clamping down on the kid's ankle and won't get off of it? Like that? Yeah, he is trying to stall, or he is effectively stalling in that position. Okay, fine. That's what I call it on, not based off of the fact that he's ahead by 1 with 7 seconds left. Keep this in mind. Never call stalling on a wrestler that's scoring or pinning. So, if you got that kid on their back and they're in danger of getting pinned, you can't be stalling. He could stay there for 1:58 trying to pin the kid. And you never go, well, you should have put him away like 30 seconds ago. I think you're just hanging out there. He's allowed to hang out there while he's got the guy in danger of being pinned. That's part of the way the sport's designed. Okay. Aggressive action assumes some reasonable level of risk by a competitor. So if they're avoiding risk, they're not going to change level on neutral position and get underneath there sometimes and go for that high crotch or that double leg or something, or try to get the hips in and elevate the other guy's hips, like that's because they're avoiding the risk. If they're just going to collar tie and circle and, tap the head and tap the, extend an arm and swat a paw at the leg, that's not a takedown attempt because they're not taking any risk. So to be aggressive means you're taking a little bit of a risk of some sort, okay? You can prevent stalling in your pre-meet by setting expectations. So I cover this very plainly with the kids that I pre-meet all the time, and I tell them about the 10-foot circle and that they have to be in the 10-foot circle if they can, and I demonstrate stuff like so. The reason I do that is because I want them to know if they stay in the 10-foot circle, like it's a lot easier for everyone, like in terms of continuous action and for me looking for stalling. A stall call isn't based because a coach is calling for it, and it's not avoided because the coach is calling for it. In other words, ignore what the coach is saying, because sometimes the coach is right. He's stalling. All he's doing is backing up. And he might be right. Do not hesitate to call stalling because you go, well, now I don't want to call it because it'll look like I'm caving into him. Forget him. If he's right, call stalling. Like, don't be influenced by what the coach says, and don't be influenced because, hey, he's backing up or whatever. Like, he isn't backing up. Your kid's pushing him. Just make the calls based off what you see, not because of whatever the coach is saying over there. Like I said, it's easier to see stalling when the action's uninterrupted. It's harder to see stalling when wrestling action takes place in 10-second increments. They get out near the boundary line, and then just as they're going out, the green kind of does something. And they're out by the boundary line again, and then green kind of looks like he's doing something just as they go out. Like, it's hard to see the stalling. Like, if all that was happening in the center of the mat for 2 straight minutes of wrestling, I could kind of see when green was like doing really nothing. He was just putting on a show over by the boundary line going, oh, because we're going out of bounds, I'll act like I was really trying something that I would have never tried inside the 10-foot circle. So if you keep them in the center of the mat and the action continues on for 2 minutes instead of in these 10 or 15-second increments, and we stop and restart, like you'll be able to see the stalling much easier when it's 2 minutes of uninterrupted action. And then the last thing I want you to keep in mind is consider the risk reward going on here. Like, is the aggressive wrestling getting properly incentivized for taking their risk? And is the non-aggressive wrestler being properly discouraged for their lack of action or their preventing of aggressive action? This is really important. Like when you get into, like, say, the 285 pounders, where you're kind of going, okay, they have different moves, their body types. So like, I get it. Like, I've wrestled 285 pounders myself, and I get that they're not going to shoot low singles all the time and do the things I did as a 101-pound wrestler, right? But the thing is, at some point, we have to be careful that when that one kid will take the risk to change level and get underneath there and try like a double leg or a high crotch or something, like we have to reward that. Otherwise, that kid won't do it because he knows if I make a mistake and that other 280-pound guy just lays on me, he's going to flatten me out, and then he's going to get a takedown, not because he did anything, but because he just took advantage of my mistake. So just keep in mind that risk-reward balance. We don't want some guy to go, why should I shoot? I keep shooting, and that guy does nothing, and the ref never hits him for stalling. But every time I get underneath there, I'm the one at risk of getting taken down because of his defensive move. So just keep that in mind, okay? So here's some principles for when you want to assess stalling. Look at the action and consider these things. First thing, have you seen anything that's explicitly written in the NFHS rule book that would be prohibited? So, for instance, shoelace untied, automatic stalling. There's no judgment involved, right? It's just like, okay, that shoelace is untied. That's just a stalling, okay? Or offensive guy's got the defensive guy broken down, and he's got the heel trapped to the butt, and it's 5 seconds. That's written right in the rule book. Stalling on the offensive wrestler. So if you see that, that's great. That makes the call easy. But we oftentimes are not seeing something that's explicitly written. So now the next thing is ask yourself this question. What aggressive thing has this competitor done to improve their position or progress towards scoring? So I ask myself that question when there's not a lot of stuff going on, because I'm trying to scrutinize now, like what exactly is, even though there's no scoring, like we could have a very competitive, very well wrestled, aggressive 0-0 tie at the end of regulation. Like it could happen. Sometimes you see these matches at state or regionals where the winner wins 1-0, and it's just the whole match is full of good wrestling. You're not thinking, well, it's 1-0 because nobody did anything. It's 1-0 because they're both really good. And so, but you think about when there's not a lot of scoring going on, you just start asking yourself that question, like, what has this person done that I would consider to be an aggressive thing that would have advanced them towards scoring or was improving their position? The next question you want to ask yourself when you start going down the stalling path is, so what could that wrestler reasonably be expected to do in that situation? So kid on the bottom is sitting there, and you have offensive wrestler has both legs in and a power half, and he's pushing the kid's face into the mat, and he's got him flattened out. What do you think the bottom guy could be doing? Should he be able to stand up and get an escape? Like hit a switch? No, he's freaking trying to survive. Like he can't even move. So we don't look at the bottom guy and go, gee, I'm going to hit him for stalling in that situation. You go, what could he reasonably be expected to do? Nothing except survive. Probably I could look at the top guy and go, what could he reasonably be expected to do? Well, he's not turning him. He could take one of those legs out maybe, and then the guy could actually turn, right? Or whatever. Like I might think differently about the top guy, but I'm always going to ask that question, like what could the wrestler reasonably be expected to do in that situation? Because I'm not trying to be unfair to the kid and not put an unrealistic expectation on him. Then what we're wanting to know is one competitor clearly demonstrating a disparity in the aggressive action? So the most common one you see, the rule of thumb you'll always hear people talk about, like, is, oh, when one guy's shot 3 times in a row, like hit the other kid for stalling. Well, that's sort of a way to enact this point, which is there a clear disparity in the aggressive action? When one guy shoots and then they break apart and then he shoots again underneath and he shoots again, there's a clear disparity now. Like 3 times in a row, like that's a clear disparity. So we're looking to see. The reality is, in stalling, it's a comparative thing, right? Because there's only a few things that are written in the rule book that say, well, it doesn't really matter what the other guy's doing. If the one kid is doing this action, that is stalling. The rest of it's comparative. You look at the reason you think someone's stalling is because you see this disparity in aggressive action. Sometimes you see them both like kind of doing questionable. Like they're not, either of them's not being aggressive. And because neither of them is sort of showing the other one up, you can sort of choose two paths. You could say, well, I'm going to start nailing them for stalling to try to promote them to start doing something, or I'm just going to let them work it out. Like, because one's not showing the other up. So you know what? Like, fine, you guys just work it out. And then, is there a pattern of non-aggressive action? Has this, because you'll see this, like it happens a lot in the neutral position. You'll see the kid that doesn't want to, initiate takedowns. He just wants to score on a front head and arm. He wants you to shoot underneath so he can put a front head and arm on because he's lazy. He doesn't like to shoot, and it works on his practice partner. His practice partner shoots in, he gets a front head and arm, and he bulldogs him onto his back and pins him. Like that's. So you see sometimes this pattern of these kids that they aren't aggressive. And so that pattern might show up across the span of a couple periods sometimes. So it may not be like all in one concentrated thing where you go, okay, I'm going to hit this kid for stalling. But it might be that, every time they're in neutral, the one kid is the one that's not initiating. Like, and now that I've seen this pattern happening enough, like, they're on their feet again, and like there he is, he's acting the same way. That's when I can see that pattern, and that's when I may sort of go ahead and hit him with that stalling call. And then last point to you newer officials, you hear me say this to you apprentices in training, like, if you're not sure about the stalling, don't call it. Okay. Because the stall call not made is forgotten. The stall call you make, you are just now invited the coaches on both sides to just chirp away the rest of this dual meet or tournament. What about that guy? Yeah, you called me for that, and how about him? Like, you're just going to hear it. Like, so if you're newer and you're not quite clear on when to call stalling, like, don't call it. Call it when you're clearly convinced. And I always sort of use the example in the apprentice training, like when that kid's mom is telling you to hit her son for stalling, yeah, you know what? That's an easy call now. No controversy. Everybody in the gym will agree with you. So if you're not sure, just stay away from the call until you're clearly convinced, okay? And that's sort of I'll end it there. The rest of this is like some scenarios that we can do in the next round of training at our next meeting. But that gives you some background on how I want you to approach this concept of stalling. Again, where I see a lot of issues in my 34 years of officiating, I do see officials that do call what I consider situational stalling. Suddenly, they're just all over the kid who has a 1-point lead in the last 15 seconds in an unfair, harsh way that they were never doing to the other kid for the first 5 minutes of the match. So, and I see people that don't really, in a sense, kind of understand the concept of stalling even, because they start calling stalling in situations that are very odd. So an example I saw at the state tournament 2 years ago in state final match where they start in neutral position. It's a restart. They're in the second or third round. Red, they tie in the middle of the mat. Red's like underneath there, change level into a high crotch. Green is like sprawling away. They kind of break apart. They're kind of standing on the edge of the 10-foot circle now, and then they are tied up again. And there goes red underneath again, like change level, trying to double leg. This guy's sprawling. He successfully sprawls. They're back up on their feet. Now they're near the boundary line. They tie up, and like green starts pushing and red goes out of bounds, and the referee hits red for stalling. Like, like that's crazy. Like, why were they out there? Because red was being aggressive and taking a risk and getting in, and now you're going to punish him because green ties up near the boundary line and like marches them out, and you go, oh, well, because red's back was kind of closer to the boundary line, I should hit him for stalling. That is like, doesn't even understand the concept of stalling when you start doing stuff like that. So I see that kind of stuff, and it makes me scratch my head, and it sets coaches off in the corner because they go, what? How was my kid stalling? What did that kid do? He did nothing. Or I saw this at state one time. This one really irked me. This is when I was coaching. It wasn't my kid, but I'm watching a bout where the red kid is leading by 2 points. There's like 30 seconds left. They're on their feet. Green is in a collar tie and just starts pushing him. And just push, 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 push. He doesn't change level and try to throw or get underneath there and, hit a double or a single. He's just pushing. And so he's pushing, and that red kid's kind of circling, and he's just pushing. And after about 5 or so seconds of that, the referee stalling red because he's like backing up or whatever. Like, okay, whatever, like fine. But the kid in green just keeps pushing, and they just circle, and he's just pushing, pushing, and so 5 seconds later, he's hit red again for stalling. Like, what the hell has green even done? Nothing. Like, now he's got a point. And then he hits red again and ties the matchup and sends it into overtime. Now that they're in overtime, red, he immediately off the whistle, like, is underneath on a double leg attempt, and the kid sprawls away, and like they break apart, and then their red goes underneath with a high crotch again. Like, okay, fine. Hit that freaking green kid for stalling twice right there. Like, he wasn't doing anything, and you just gave him 2 points and send this into overtime. Now that the red kid's like literally underneath there, aggressive takedown attempts, and you don't do anything. You just let green have a free ride. Like, so that kind of stuff, I see that stuff happening. That just shows me people don't really understand like the nature of stalling and don't take a step back and go, yeah, I know, like, okay, you know what? Like, if you're going to call stalling that quickly, you better work both ways, right? Or if you're going to reward that kind of like aggressive action, guess what? You're feeding the wrong dynamic on a mat and in a match. So that's why I sort of want to give you some things to think about and how you look at stalling and apply it so that you won't ever be like the butt of one of my stories where I go, wow, that official was like, didn't have no idea like how inconsistent they applied stalling, or that they would call stalling in that situation like that, just like they don't understand it. Like, I don't want us to be that way. We may be like, I'm very slow about stalling. Like, I don't call stalling that aggressively, but when I do, there's no controversy with it. It's, nobody has much of a beef with it. And maybe that's why I'm not calling it quite as aggressively. It's sort of like, you know what, like I said, I have a bias to say they're trying to wrestle aggressively. Let them work it out. And when there's a big disparity, then I don't hesitate to call it when there's a disparity. When one guy's showing the other guy up, by all means, boom, just put it up there. But I'm not looking for it. I'm not trying to insert it into matches in certain situations. So just give you that stuff to sort of give you some preparation. Okay. Any last sort of questions? I think does somebody have their hand up? I couldn't tell.
I got a question for you, Bob.
Yeah.
So totally off topic of stalling, if that's okay.
Okay, no worries.
I've got a highline coach, assistant coach, during the middle of the match or the end of the period,